Hello everyone, and I apologize for my less than put together look today. Unfortunately, I'm going in for a mild, very minor surgical procedure, and I'm not allowed to have any makeup on, and I wasn't allowed to put anything in my hair. So unfortunately, the video you're getting today is me pretty much stripped down. But that's not what's important today, because what's important today is what we have on our agenda. A couple of things, housekeeping, that I want to keep you aware of is remember that you still have 2 paper assignments, you still have annotated bibliographies, all due before the end of the semester. So no rush. I just want to keep reminding you that those are on the plate. And no, I have not checked the discussion board yet to see what's been done, but that will be happening today, hopefully. I'm going to be laid up for just the evening, so I'll have plenty of time. The second thing I wanted to sort of do some housekeeping on was that I was supposed to have put a discussion board question for you last week on board, and I was just made aware that I did not do that. So that is 100% on me, of course, no need to worry. I will be rectifying that situation today, and you will have a discussion board assignment as soon as I finish recording this video. So be on the lookout for that. Okay, back to today. Now, I gotta admit to you that talking about language in social movements is not my favorite topic. Why? Because I study communication, I study symbols, I study language all the time. And to me, a lot of what's in the book is sort of, how do I put this politely? To me, I mean, and I don't know if you feel that way because you've been studying communication for a little while as well, but what I'm going to do is just run through a few of the highlights from this chapter that I think might merit some discussion, but I'm thinking that the textbook is fairly straightforward. If I am incorrect, by all means, just let me know, because a lot of times we professors, we read something and we're like, oh, this is obvious, but that doesn't mean it's obvious to you. So let me know if you have any struggles with this particular chapter. In the meantime, let's talk about it. So why do we have to talk about language and social movements? Well, probably one of the most important things for us to realize is that the study of social movements is not regulated to communication scholars. In fact, most of the time communication scholars, very rarely actually write about social movements. Most of the time it's sociology professors or psychology, political science sometimes, but communication scholars only came into it probably in the last 30 or 40 years, so not that long. However, one of the reasons why communication scholars are called for is because people don't understand the impact that language has on creating, maintaining, and assisting a movement as it goes through the stages of a movement's life. So a lot of people don't realize that you have to adjust your messaging sometimes, that you have to adapt, that you have to use different strategies. The same repetitive strategy over and over again is not going to work. I keep needing to sneeze. I should just let myself sneeze. I apologize. So the same strategy is not going to work all of the time. Let's talk about why that is and where this comes from. So as you know, probably by now, language is made up of symbols, right? Normally we refer to a symbol, we're talking about a word. Now, in my world, where we are practicing rhetoric every time that we speak, some people might say, well, it's not rhetoric that we're speaking. It's not rhetoric. Words are not just rhetoric, is what I'm trying to say. Rhetoric is not just the words that we're speaking, but that whenever we speak, we are performing a rhetorical act. That is to say, we are doing something. Now, your book hints at this when it talks about symbolic acts. It's saying that the words that we use are not restricted to just words. They are, in fact, acts in of themselves. Part of this comes from the social constructivist perspective, right, that says that our language creates the world that we live in. It doesn't just create the world that we live in by us identifying with certain words and phrases that define who we are or what groups we belong to, as we've talked about before, but also can create a world where things that may seem unimportant to people can suddenly become important. Things that seem like they're far off and distant and very, very far away, we can make more immediate and urgent to people. So, for example, whenever we talk about whether or not education, public education, K through 12 is important, I told you I would always use my social movement as an example. Whenever we talk about that, some people who are like, well, my kids graduated a long time ago. Or if you have the attitude of my mother, we shouldn't worry about those things anymore unless you have a kid in the school. So unless you have a kid in the school, this isn't important. And my argument is always the same. It's absolutely still crucial, and here's why. Because we as a community pay for that education. We as a community need our students to be well educated so that they can be successful, which then, whether they stay here or not, helps the community be more successful. Most people might not realize this, but almost all of NICSA's property taxes go to the school. It's like 85% or something. Every tax that we pay goes to the school. Why? Because we want the school to be top notch. Why do you want the school to be top notch? Well, if you're ready for the selfish answer, I'm going to give it to you. You want your school district to be top notch because that means your property values are going to stay high and go higher. If you look at some towns that have absolutely just failed, it's always starting with the amount of investment the community makes into the school system. Crane, Missouri is one of my biggest examples of this. Where my daughter goes to school, my stepdaughter, in Farmington, Arkansas, is an example of this. If those schools fall, those towns no longer exist. I've got a student who works with me sometimes, and he's from Savannah, Missouri, and he says the same thing. If it wasn't for the school, there would literally be no there, right? Because it wouldn't exist. Schools are sort of the backbone of building community, right? Now, what's interesting is this is where I'm going to go off topic just a little bit, but I think it's important, and to talk about John Dewey. John Dewey wrote once that essentially communication builds communities. And that's important, and that's what I just said. But the next step is even more important. Communities build democracy. Okay? So if you think about it, if you want a democratic system of power, you have to have communities working together. Now, this, again, seems like a big duh statement, but people seem to forget it. I mean, just the other day I was watching TV where somebody at CPAC said literally, we don't want democracy anymore. And I thought about what that means. What does that mean? If somebody says, I don't want a democracy anymore, it means I don't want to participate anymore in the rules and decisions that get made for our communities. And that means essentially some sort of dictatorship or very, very centralized power. And that's a very scary idea for those of us who study not just politics, but who study social movements, because social movements require communities to be able to work together and to communicate. What is the first thing that they did in the Arab countries during the Arab Spring when they were trying to free themselves from authoritarian regimes? The first thing to be cut off was the internet. The ability to communicate with other people outside of the walls of the world you live in, to communicate with people, to build a coalition of people around the same idea is the key to having a community survive. And if Dewey is right, those communities will want to have some say in how they are ruled. In other words, a democracy. So it works forwards and backwards here, that the language we use to communicate with each other builds or disbands communities. And if it builds communities, then it upholds democracy. If it disbands community, then it upholds some other type of centralized power. Okay? And that's just, I'm sorry, science, it's math. I'm not really sure what it is, but what I do know is it's not strictly a constructivist position. It is a rhetorical act that has impacts on the way that we live our lives. Not just how we identify, not just how we're educated, not just whether or not there's free college or not, but literally how we live our lives day to day is impacted by that. So when people say to me social movements are not important, I just sort of like laugh, because that's the only thing I can do. If it wasn't for U-Turn in Education here in Nixa, there are several things I can guarantee would not have happened that have just happened in the last few weeks. One of the things that's happened is that the school board itself has decided, right before the election, of course, because some of them are up for re-election, right before the election, that they're going to have a town hall for all community members to come and hear about what the board is doing. Transparency. The second thing that they did was they recognized that we were saying teachers don't feel appreciated. So they bought them donuts. I think it was like last week. And the teachers felt more appreciated. Now, I don't know. Personally, as a teacher in these situations, getting paid, $25, $30, maybe $40,000 a year if they're lucky, a donut is not going to make me feel appreciated, right? I've spent more money on school supplies, on books for the kids, on projects that I think will help my students learn, things to make them more comfortable, ways of helping the students. I've spent way more in a semester than on all of the donuts in the world, right? So it's impossible for me to understand why donuts were a good sign of appreciation. However, I will say this. We have been screaming loudly that we need more transparency from our school board in how they make decisions. We've been screaming that teachers feel underappreciated, and that's why they are leaving in droves. I was talking to someone from the education department at MSU recently who was saying that for some reason people don't want to go to Nixa to do their student teaching. I can't imagine why. I could give you 15 reasons why right now, if you wanted me to. And so are those two things what need to be done? Well, we definitely, as an organization, pushed for more transparency. We did this in a number of ways, and we pushed for more appreciation for teachers. One way was that we actually showed appreciation to the teachers, but we aren't the school board, we are not the district, but we were able to help give them some support in various different ways. The second thing that we did was we called for transparency at every school board meeting that we attended. And third, 2 of us ran for school board. 1 of us is running for school board again this year. Yes, that is me, by the way. And the idea is not that I need to win. The idea is that we need to keep pushing the needle towards the things that are good for our education system in Nixa. And as long as we keep pushing them incrementally, remember what I said, social movements are evolutions, they're not revolutions. As long as I can keep pushing them incrementally, I will run every year if I have to. And no, it never matters if I win, because the people in power are those who choose to be in power. So if people on the school board think, oh, well, we can act any way that we want, we can unilaterally act if we want to, they can't. Not if they have organizations like the parent-teacher organizations, the PTAs, or even outside organizations, internal or external, teachers associations, unions, etc. Even if they don't have those, they have groups like, for us, U-Turn in Education, the Right to Read Coalition, the Freedom to Read Coalition from PEN America. There are people that are pushing to make the lives of teachers better who, quote, don't have any power. Just because you don't have assigned leadership power does not mean that you don't have power. And that is the crux of a social movement. So how do I demonstrate that we have power. You just keep sending the message that you do. So a year ago, our school board never would have had a town hall to be transparent about what it is that they're doing. And they never would have bought Hertz Donuts for the entire school district teachers. They never would have done stuff like that until we came in and said these things need to be done. Now, it wasn't one message. It wasn't like last year, my friend Jason and I ran and we said these things and boom, they did it this year. It doesn't work that way. You need constant reminders that, hey, we're holding you accountable for this. So U-Turn showed up to every single school board meeting. We had at least 3 people there every single time speaking to these issues. And we've got people who are not going to those meetings but are sitting at home and emailing the school board literally weekly to say this. All 6 members of the school board got emails every week from multiple people saying these are things that need to be changed. Now, are there other things that we asked for that we didn't get? Absolutely. But are we having an impact? Yes, absolutely. And so the more you fight for something like this with repetitive communication patterns over and over again, reinforcing the communication patterns. My school board buttons say Elizabeth Dudash Buskirk for Nixa, but they also say things like listening to teachers since 1974. And my husband said, 1974, that was the year you were born. And I said, yeah, that's right. My grandmother was a teacher. Both of my aunts were teachers. And at the time that I was born. So yeah, I've been listening to teachers for a very long time. My other slogan is ask a teacher. Because we don't ask teachers what we need to do to educate our students. We've got a lawyer, we've got pastors, we've got, or preachers, I'm not sure what their official designation is. We've got an accountant. That's who's on our school board. Do you hear one person who's an expert in frickin' education? No. And you know what? This is true for school boards all across the country. This is not unique to Nixa, Missouri. But what is unique to Nixa, Missouri is that there aren't organizations out in all of these other districts that are holding their school boards accountable for keeping their community successful. And that's the key. So look at that language for a second. We're not saying keep our kids in school. We're not saying teach something different. We're not even saying that we don't do a good job educating our students. What we're saying is that our community needs to continue to be successful. Right now, I think that if changes are made right now, we may preserve Nixa's district as a Blue Star district, or a Blue Ribbon district, as a Gold Star district. We may be able to preserve that for the next 10 or 15 years, just like it's taken so long to build up to be that. But only if changes are made now. So there we go, making it urgent, making it present, making it immediate, right? Immediacy, it's right there in front of you all, no matter who you are, whether you have children in the school district or you're a member of the community. This is important for you in order for the success of the community. So that's how we sort of use that linguistic strategy of symbol actions, symbolic action, rhetorical action, rather than just words. Now, your book goes through a series of very specific ways that you can do this. One of them I just demonstrated to you, which is creating a sense of identification. Getting your audience to understand that they are impacted by this, that this should be important to them for a number of reasons, and getting them to identify with your cause. If you could get people to identify with your cause, you're more likely to get people to help you act on your cause, okay? And that's literally all you need to do, because there are a lot of people out there, a lot of people, and I mean, I'm to blame for this because clearly I'm not getting the message out as much as I should. You hope to reach 100% of the people, but you're not going to. But there are plenty of people out there who don't know that this battle for the good of the community is going on, or who don't recognize the relationship between the school district and the success of the community and what their role in that should be. Okay? So it's important to remind them of that. Does it sound like I'm telling them something they should already know? Absolutely. But how many times have you heard somebody say something and go, why didn't I know that already? Why didn't I think of that already? And the answer's simple. We have other things to think about. You need to be reminded. We all need to be reminded that, hey, this is important, whatever that thing is. And for the last 20 years, Nixa School District's been floating right along. It's been doing great. Under Kleinsmith, amazing. It did great. It built up. It became a blue ribbon school. Have blue ribbon schools. It became a gold ribbon or gold star school district. I keep mixing those up for some reason. We did all that, and it was going great. Nobody needed to be fighting about it until about 5 years ago. And then all of a sudden things started happening and people started going, wait a minute, that's not the way our school is supposed to go. You're not supposed to eliminate the GLA. You're not supposed to remove books from the library. You're not supposed to cut off our students' abilities to participate in certain activities, to not fund future business leaders or not fund the debate team. By the way, they're not doing that. These are just examples that I'm pulling up. Although they did get rid of the GLA, the Gay Lesbian Alliance. And wow, that was one of the things on our application to be a blue ribbon high school that we won. Maybe we don't deserve that. You know, there are certain things that we have done that have been probably very hurtful to our school district. And some things that are helpful. And it's important to recognize when these people do good things. So what's the next messaging strategy? It's to make the opposition comfortable in saying things like, yeah, you did a great job of giving donuts to all of the teachers. You did a great job holding this town hall that you're going to hold for transparency, but it's not enough. There's somewhere else we need to go. We need to do more than donuts for our teachers. We need to do more than one meeting right before the election so you can maintain your leadership role, that is to say your power, maintain that because you are using the office to speak to people. I don't have that opportunity. I can't take donuts to all the teachers in Nixa. I can't go and speak and show transparency at a town hall as a school board member because I'm not one, right? Those are advantages people have to keep power, and that's fine if they want to do that. But the other things need to be acknowledged as well. So sometimes social movements only exist to shine a light on what is wrong so that they can fix it, right? We don't necessarily care about the mechanism for fixing something. I can't take any credit for the fact that they've decided to do this transparency town hall panel discussion. I can't take any credit for them deciding to give donuts to teachers as a sign of appreciation. I can't take any credit for any of those any more than U-Turn can take credit for them. But I'll tell you what, I do take credit for putting the ideas in these people's heads. Me and my organization made sure that people understood the importance of these things. And are they baby steps? Oh my God, they are baby steps. They are teeny, tiny baby steps. They could do so much more, but that only means that the movement has more work to do, right? It's that idea of maintaining. There's not a crisis, but there's still a need, right? So that's where this maintenance of the social movement becomes so important. And again, you do it through rhetorical construction, communication constructivism. You tell them that the problem still exists. You don't debate it. You just tell them the problem still exists and here are some ways to solve the problem. And maybe they will, maybe they won't. To be honest with you, I am stunned at the little bit of effort that they have made. And I'm not being sarcastic. I literally am stunned that they chose to do this. But am I happy about it? Absolutely. Is my job done? No, my job is not done. Okay. Now, what I just did was told you a story, right? I just gave you a narrative the story of why the social movement still needs to exist. That is also a communication strategy, to construct a story, a narrative that people can buy into so that they're motivated to act, right? And your book talks about that. Your book also talks about songs and talks about sometimes poetry that people read. And it's all for the same goal, which is that constant, how do we learn? How do we learn? Repetition, okay? Not imitation, repetition. Any study of rhetoric will tell you that in order to get your message across, you must repeat the message. Now, some people get confused and think that means that you repeat the message and that's it. That's where you stop. But it's not a repeat of the message. It's a reinforcement of a message. You need to get it to people in all different ways. Now, one of the things your book talks about that I'm sure you know I'm a huge fan of, which is obscenity. Why is obscenity a linguistic strategy that your book would talk about? Because it gets attention for a moment. Just for a moment, it gets attention. So during the 1960s, and this became a landmark Supreme Court case, by the way, in the 1960s, their obscenity was fuck war. That was literally what they said, fuck war. Now think about that for a minute. First of all, fuck is the most versatile word in the English language. I'm not questioning that. But at the time, this was so brazen. Somebody had it on the back of their jacket. Fuck war. And that went all the way to the Supreme Court. Can you say that? Yes, you can say that. Did it get attention? Absolutely. Was it a pro-war stance? No, it was not. It was definitely against the war. But that was not the only message they had, right? We had songs like Give Peace a Chance. And the Christmas song by John Lennon, So This Is Christmas, I think is actually the name of it. You had beatniks writing poetry about war and peace. We had a book called War and Peace. That was long before the Civil War, obviously. I'm sorry, I'm making a joke there because it's a very long book if you haven't read it. But we did have some other novels, literature that turned inward, that were about individual experiences with the war. One of my favorites was written long after the war. And by the way, when I say the war here, I'm talking about Vietnam right now. The Vietnam War stirred up the greatest amount of anti-war rhetoric that we had experienced up until that point, right? World War I and World War II were patriotic, go fight, go America. Vietnam flipped that on its head, right? And so we had a lot of things happening all at once. We had the shootings at Kent State in Ohio of the protesters. We had protests going on, people burning their cards. I think of the word, draft cards. People dodging the draft. We had songs coming out that were popular. Peter, Paul, and Mary, Kingston Trio, Bob Dylan, all of these people who were writing about how war is bad. And then if you were taught that war is bad in the schools, your professor was considered a crazy liberal hack. We still are, I think, in some ways, still considered that you will somehow get brainwashed into thinking that war is bad, which to me isn't that hard to do. I mean, I don't know a lot of people, even soldiers, even my son who's in the Navy, I don't know a lot of them saying, let's definitely do what we can to get involved in a ground war in Asia. Like, we're not doing that. We're not advocating for that, right? A lot of people want peace. It's just how you choose to demonstrate for that peace. When my son told me that he was going to join the Navy, he's like, "Are you okay with this?" Because I've always been anti-gun, and I've always been pro-peace. I can't say anti-war because sometimes war is necessary, but more importantly, it's not my decision to make, right? And I said, yeah, I'm totally okay with this. Let me tell you about your grandparents. Your great grandparents, really. My father was not allowed to go to war, even though he wanted to. He had a health problem; he wasn't allowed to go. But my grandfather on my mom's side was in the army, and my grandfather was in the Navy, and my grandfather on my dad's side was in the army. And so he and I sat down. We had a long talk about serving your country and how important that is to me, and how I think that there's all kinds of service, right? But he had heard so much anti-war rhetoric out of my mouth that he was afraid to tell me that he wanted to go into the service. But I'm very, very proud of him for doing so. This is also a boy who came out to me as straight. So that gives you an idea about how my son was raised. I definitely was open to anything that he wanted to do. But he, we get these messages reinforced all the time from multiple sources: news stories, songs, protests, books, movies that were made. Apocalypse Now. I mean, come on, that wasn't a pro-war movie, right? So, is it repetition? It's repetition of a general message, yes, but it's not consistent. Just, I'm against the war, I'm against the war, I'm against the war, I'm against the war, you should be against the war. Done. All right, that's not how that works. You build on it. Now, what I like to say is that there is a synergistic messaging going on. Now, some people don't know what that means, synergistic, so I'm going to explain it to you, and if you do know, I apologize for the rewind here real quick. But synergy is what occurs when you have something that is more than just the sum of its parts, okay? Where you have layer upon layer upon layer, and each layer makes that block all the more strong, okay? Much stronger because of it together. These things are fine separate. They're powerful separately. When you start to build on them and put them together, that is when you have something called a synergistic effect. You learn more upon more upon more. You have more effect more and more and more as you pile on. So you've got a message coming from songs, you've got a message coming from news, you've got a message coming from your teachers, you've got a message coming from parents or the community members or from children, whatever it is, all of that piles up to really get a far greater effect than those things alone. And it's not that hard to really see this in the real world either. I won't use U-turn for a second. I'm going to use instead the reproductive rights thing right now, because it used to be a very clear-cut and black and white issue. You were pro-life or you were pro-choice, and that was it. That was it. That's all you had. Over time, that debate has changed, and the movements have adapted, because now we're having debates about a woman's not just right to choose pregnancy, but to choose birth control, about a man's rights involved in these things, about IVF treatments, which, by the way, take a man and a woman, so men very much involved in this, guys. So you have all of these messages that are starting to come from doctors, come from people who have had experiences, from people who are victims of sexual assault that result in pregnancy. We've got young kids, we've got older people, we've got people who say whose lives could have been saved. I myself, if I got pregnant, which I know sounds impossible, but it's not. If I get pregnant right now, I'm in deep trouble, because I cannot carry a baby. That baby would kill me, and I would kill it, in the sense that I cannot exist as a pregnant person, and both of us would lose our lives. So what do? Well, both of us have to lose our lives. Under Missouri law right now, both of us have to lose our lives. Luckily, I could go somewhere if I needed to, right? But why would we allow two people to die? If you believe that baby is a person, why would you let two people die instead of one? We've got all these messages coming in from all different places. asking us difficult questions, by the way, right? Very difficult. And if you're someone like myself who's been around for 50 years, and you were so used to saying, I am 100% pro-life, all of a sudden, you might find yourself facing very difficult questions, okay? Because what does that mean to be pro-life? Well, that means that if I got pregnant, I would just die. And that would be fine. Everybody would be okay with that. That's what it should be. That's ludicrous. The more that we progress in society, well, I'm sorry, it's ludicrous to me. I don't want to die, right? The more we progress in society, the more we learn about the intricacies of a message. And there's another problem. A social movement becomes more complex the more it exists, right? The Clean Water and Clean Air Act, for example, of 1973, those are easy. 72, 73, somewhere in there, one of those 2 years. Those are easy, right? We should have clean water. We should have clean air. Boom, we're done, right? That's not how it works. Because some of the sacrifices that need to be made to have clean water or to have clean air clearly are not being made. And we don't think about the economic impact of that, right? People in central Pennsylvania have been able to light their water faucets on fire for decades, long before Flint, long before we talked about fracking. Nobody cared, nobody paid attention, but over the years, more and more places started to experience this phenomenon of lighting your freaking water faucet on fire because of the pollutants in it. People joke about how the Cuyahoga River in Ohio caught fire. How did a river catch fire? I mean, there's actually been more than one example now, but back then it was, haha, that's hilarious. It's so bad it caught fire. That's not funny. That is drinking water. That is wastewater. That is water that comes out of the sky vis-a-vis rain, right? So the issues become more complex. You can't just have one single message that is single layered, all right? And that's what the book is trying to get to you through this chapter on language strategies. I maybe made it just a little bit more complex than the book does. The book gives you some very specific strategies for using language in a social movement, and I hope that comes through. If you have questions about the chapter, all the same, obviously, let me know. Meanwhile, right this second, I am going to stop this video and I am going to write your discussion board assignment for you so that you have it. And I will see you all next week, if not sooner. Have a good one.